Introduction to Classical Tibetan, Lesson 2-1, Tibetan Particles and Personal Pronouns. The Tibetan language utilizes grammatical cases in much the same way as languages like Sanskrit, Latin, and German, if you're familiar with those. Tibetan grammar relies on the use of particles, which have no meaning on their own, but are attached to words or phrases to indicate their role in the context of a sentence. Remember, Tibetan sentences consist of words, such as nouns, adjectives, verbs, and so on, and particles, which modify those words. Particles in Tibetan come after the word or phrase that they modify. This differs from the way in which we construct sentences in English. Take, for example, the English sentence, I went to school. Here, the word to is a preposition, meaning that it comes before the word that it modifies. Tibetan, on the other hand, relies on postpositions, particles that come after the word that they modify. In other words, if we were to reconstruct this sentence in Tibetan, the meaning of the word to would come after the word for school. This will become clearer as we move through some examples later on. It is important to keep in mind that just as an English preposition can modify an entire phrase, as in, for example, I live in my brother's house, a Tibetan postposition can also modify an entire list, phrase, or nominal group. Sometimes Tibetan particles can be omitted. This can happen when the grammatical case, that is, the role that a word or phrase plays in a sentence, can be inferred from the context of the sentence, or in the case of poetry, when meter is taken into consideration. But we won't worry about that just yet. Case particles show the relationship between words. That is, they can indicate the agent of an action, the object of an action, location, ownership, and so on. Tibetan is usually understood as relying on 8 cases, which were originally derived from Sanskrit. Let's go over these cases briefly now. You don't have to memorize all of them now, as we will spend the next few lessons learning the cases in greater detail. But it's a good idea just to have a general sense of the case system in order to understand how it functions. The first case is the nominative case. This is usually used for the subject of a sentence. It is not marked by any particle. The second case is the accusative case. It usually marks the object of a sentence. It is marked by a ladun particle. We'll get into that later. The third case is the instrumental case. It refers to the agent of an action and is marked by ki, gi, yi, or sa. Again, don't worry about the details too much here. This is just a quick overview. The fourth case is dative. It indicates purpose. It, like the accusative case, is marked by a ladun particle. The fifth case is called the ablative case. It shows the source of a thing and is marked by ne or le. The sixth case is called the genitive case. It shows connections between two things and is marked by ki, gi, yi, or e. The seventh case is the locative case. It indicates location and is also marked with a ladun particle. Finally, the eighth case is called the vocative case and is used when making a direct reference to someone or something. It is also not marked by any particle. These cases and their corresponding particles are the backbone of the Tibetan language, and once you can understand them, you can actually understand most of Tibetan grammar. It should be noted that there are also particles in Tibetan that do not signify cases. We've already covered a few of these, and we will encounter more throughout the remainder of this course. The main focus of the rest of this course will involve learning to identify particles in Tibetan sentences and understanding the ways in which they relate words and phrases to each other. This may seem overwhelming at first, but don't worry. We'll go through each of the different types of particles in turn as the semester progresses. Shifting gears a bit, let's turn to the personal pronouns. There are many words in Tibetan that can be translated as different types of personal pronouns, but here we'll just cover the most common ones. The first person pronoun I is either nga or dak. Dak is more common in classical Tibetan, but you will occasionally encounter the word nga in classical texts. The second person pronoun you is kyu or ke when showing respect. And the third person pronoun is ko, meaning he, mo, meaning she, or kong, which is a respectful term that can mean either he or she. To make any of these personal pronouns plural, you can simply add a plural particle onto the end. In addition to nam, which we've already learned, the particles chak and tso can also be added. So we is dakchak or natso. You in the plural form is kyunam or kyenam, and they can be monam or, to show respect, kongso. Finally, reflexive pronouns can be made by adding rang or ni after the pronouns. For example, ngarang means myself, kirang means yourself, morang means herself, and so on. That's all we'll cover for today. To review, Tibetan relies on postpositional particles rather than the prepositional particles that we use in English, which come after the word or phrase that they modify. Tibetan is based on 8 cases, but you don't have to memorize all of them right now. These cases show the relationships between words in a sentence. And finally, personal pronouns can have ordinary or honorific uses and can be made plural or reflexive by adding certain particles.